Welcome to the Awaken on Purpose podcast, where each week you'll hear inspirational stories of heart-centered leaders who have awakened to their higher purpose and taken that leap of faith to follow their heart and make an impact in the world. Get ready to be enlightened, empowered, and transformed with your host, Jennifer Spohr.
I am thrilled to welcome to the show as a guest today, Oleg Lougheed. His start in life was inauspicious. At 9 years old, he relinquished his parents' rights and entered the Russian orphanage. At 12 years old, he decided to be adopted into a new family in a new country halfway across the world to start a new life. At 24 years old, he began his journey of helping others live the life they have always dreamed of, despite their hardships and misfortunes, by allowing them to recognize the uniqueness and worth within their own story. Oleg, I'm so pleased to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show. You know, as you're reading this bio and the last part about 24 years old, it seems so long ago. And I think when you get fully invested into your mission and you're guided by who you are at your heart, time, it really loses, I think, the label that we choose to have with it. And so as part of this journey, just as you were saying that, I was just thinking, wow, that was so long ago, but really it's only been two and a half years. That's all from starting that. So it's an interesting phenomenon that you experience when you are really aligned with who you are and how time is no longer a ticking clock, but rather it just is.
That is such an excellent point that you bring up. And I feel the same since I've started my work, my coaching practice a couple of years ago now. It does feel like longer than that. But then again, it feels almost like time has stood still. Like there really isn't time. There really is just the moment now.
Yeah. And I think a part of that, it makes me think, as you're saying it, is because you are truly invested in the process of achieving whatever it is in front of you and really building from the heart. And so there's really no need to count down the minutes, the hours, the days to whatever the accomplishment may happen. And then the other part that makes me, I guess, better understand that as we're talking about it is just living in this perspective, which I think you and I both share. And that is I firmly believe we're one connection away from making whatever it is that we envision happening. And you never know where that connection is going to come or who that person may be. So as part of that, I think it really puts time into a whole different realm of understanding, because then you're just doing what you're meant to do or what you are choosing to do as far as the purpose and everything that you've defined. But as part of that journey, there's really no need to tick down the minutes, like I said, the minutes, the hours, and the days that you have, because you never know when you're going to meet that person or that opportunity.
Absolutely. And we are experiencing joy and fulfillment in what we're doing. And when you are in joy, there is no time.
No, that's well said. And I think the other thing that's interesting about your work in general, and I think the reason why I connected to you to begin with, is this redefined purpose, a redefined definition of what it means to have a purpose. And so, when we talk about joy and happiness and everything, and ultimately purpose, I think all of them can be aligned. For the longest time, I remember I used to not only tell myself, but some of the people that I was closest to, that were looking for this ultimate awakening or this moment when they will find their purpose. But what I begin to understand is that you get to define your purpose through commitment. So for me, it truly is as simple as finding that one experience, finding that one event within your life that you want to look at from a different perspective or a different view, and then committing to that process of developing that perspective and then refining it over time. And as part of that process, I think you also find all of these other little nuggets, such as joy, such as happiness, pleasures within meeting new connections, gratitude. I think when you're fully aligned with who you are, what I've learned is that the more I've been able to tune in to my inner voice and really understand my own existence from the lens that I have now, that's when I began to understand the importance of gratitude. And there's really no need to even judge or compare for me anymore. It just is. We all walk different paths and different journeys. So why don't we just embrace them for what they are instead of judging each other by the fact that we may not be at a similar placeholder or mile marker within our own journey, because the path we're taking is completely unique to who we are.
That is 1,000% true. And the judgment comes from the fact that many people are conditioned to believe that success is cookie cutter, that it either means something, it is something, or it isn't something, That's where judgment and comparison comes from. And beliefs are also formed for each of us based upon our upbringing, our environment. It's kind of like we know what we know.
Yeah. No, it really is like that. And success is kind of interesting as well, because I like your point of cookie cutter as far as the definition that I think is presented to us in today's day and age. And, I repeat this one day after another, and I tell people that success is not a final destination. I firmly believe there's no moment in life when you wake up and you tell yourself, oh, this is it, I've made it. Or at least I don't think you should, because then there's nothing else to strive for.
I agree.
There's no need to improve.
Yep, I agree. I believe we are eternal students. There is always an invitation to mastery.
No, students of life. That's a really good way to put it. I firmly believe that's what we ultimately are.
Is it your journey, Oleg, as a child that inspired you? Is that what the main point of inspiration was for where you're at today and the work that you're doing?
I would say so. And the reason why is I think the more conversations that I've been able to have with people of different upbringings and backgrounds, where I begin to learn is that for most of us, especially those who have had traumatic experiences within our lives in our past, what guides us is this vision that we can make it better for someone else who might be going through a similar challenge. So for me, the journey of being born in Russia and not having the experience of a traditional household where I had the constant support from loving parents who cared for me, who gave me guidance, who helped me along similar things in life and decision making, things like that. But really, I was born into a different environment. I had to figure a lot of that stuff out as I got older. I had to understand where my food may come from, who I can trust because of all those things. And so to answer your question, without a doubt, the journey that I'm on right now in helping people really get to the core of who they are and what they stand for and what they choose to do with it. That's been the guiding force of it all. But behind it, what ignites it all is that past. It's that anchor that's always there. And it's a point that is extremely valuable in my life because it allows me to take a step back and reflect upon my lived experience and understand it through the perspective that I have right now. It's really interesting for me as I look at different leaders, influencers, or just people in general, is I think sometimes we run into this space within our lives where we think that change is no longer okay or change is no longer possible. So what I tell people is that the story that I know right now of my past and the story that I choose to tell myself in the present of everything that has happened to me and everything that I am today, at the core, and that is principles, will probably be the same story moving forward, but certain elements of it will change. And what I mean by that is the more you share, the more you put yourself out there with your story, and especially the things that were painful, I firmly believe that's how you develop a different perspective of it. That's how the reframing happens. And so if 10 or 20 years down the road, I'm presenting this story and my upbringing with a slightly different view, that's okay. But what I understand is that it is never too late to change. You can start the process of looking things differently at any given moment of your life. I firmly believe that. I say that because I do that.
Yes, I agree with you. That is I agree with you 100% on that. We cannot change the past. Our future exists in potential. Our power to instill change is in the present moment right now. I'd like to back up a little bit. Earlier in our conversation, you were talking about some of the driving force around wanting to make an impact, and you had mentioned the anger always being there. I was curious about that and wanted to ask you, is it actually anger or is it passion or compassion?
It's a really good question. I think for me, it might have started off as anger, and then it over time developed into passion. So knowing the things that I did and the circumstances of each event, especially the traumatic experiences that I went through, such as seeing the moments of abuse, living at the Russian orphanage and being able to witness that life there. I think the anger part came from the fact that I knew all of those things, but I also knew the fact that there were other people living in those current conditions, and that at that particular time, I felt that I couldn't do anything to help them not experience the same lifestyle as I did. So I think what started off as an angry moment of not necessarily being angry at people, but being almost like being angry at the fact that you think you don't have the resources to make a difference. And then slowly over time, the more I continue to work on myself and better process the story and better understand it, that's when I think it slowly transitioned into passion. And that's where I was able to, I think, find joy and fulfillment, because I was able to not only look at all those situations from a different view, but ultimately I was able to better accept myself for who I was. So instead of looking at myself and being quote unquote angry with the fact that I didn't have the resources or the skills or the knowledge to make a difference, I started to embrace myself for who I was at that particular time. You know, when we look at life, I look at life and I see two things. Well, I see thousands of things, but the two things that I choose to focus on is that I firmly believe that I always live in the lack of and the abundance of. And so you can put anything within that. You can put resources, money, whatever it may be. I think there's always I've always believed that there's always another side to the story. So I can choose to look at my life right now as an individual who's walking this path without $1 million. And therefore, I can choose to paint a narrative and a story around that as far as how that impacts the rest of my life. Or I could choose to look at it from an entirely different view. And I could say to myself that, yes, I may not have that amount of money, but what are the things that I do have? And that is relationships. And as you've noticed throughout your work, money can't buy relationships. Money can't buy trust. Money can't buy courage. Money can't buy vulnerability.
Money is a tool.
Money is a tool. Exactly.
Money is energy, just as everything else is.
And so it's knowing those two things. What it has made me realize over time is that I do have the resources, and the resources may not be in the same shape and form that I envision them being, but they're here. So then the question becomes, how do I become resourceful? How do I use the current connections and whatever else that's at hand to be able to reach back out to some of those places that I lived in, or to the moments that I've experienced, and help other people along similar paths and journeys?
It really is all about perception.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always tell people, the places you need to go, the things you need to do, that's all logistics.
Yeah, it is.
90% of the journey is faith and mindset.
Yeah.
And we get to choose that. That is what is so awesome about being a human and having free will. We can choose to hold on to the pain, or we can choose to understand what we can learn from it and how we can turn it into a way of serving others, as you were mentioning earlier, and then move forward.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And, it reminds me of a quote that I recently saw, and it was, it's in regard to faith or self-belief. And it was talking about believe you can, and you're halfway there. And it's so true.
It is
because
true. Yeah.
once you start believing in the fact that you can accomplish whatever it is in front of you, or you can make a difference in someone else's life, then that's it. You really are almost halfway there. And in some cases, you're maybe even more than halfway there, because then you're able to create this space where not only do you believe in the outcome, but you begin to believe in yourself and your own abilities of making that particular thing happen. And then you start to attract other people. You're mentioning the fact that money is a form of energy. Well, the belief that you have is the same exact thing. It's an energy that's being transferred to other people. So if I believe in myself, and if I believe in the fact that I can truly make a difference in X, Y, and Z way, then it's going to attract people like you and others who are developing similar communities, and then want to come together as a joint force to make a greater impact.
Absolutely, because like attracts like. Whether you look at it from a scientific standpoint or a spiritual one, everything is energy. And we are in each other's circle, right? Because we emit a similar energetic frequency.
Yeah. And we get to choose to a degree. I'll say that as far as what the energy is, what the energy that we give off. I don't think we get to choose as much as far as what the energy we receive, but that boils down to the belief. It's one of those things, if you choose to put yourself out there in this particular way, then the belief is that you will receive similar traits and qualities and personalities that are similar to how you're living your life.
Absolutely. There are a lot of people out there, and I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are in a place, right? They're at a crossroads, maybe feeling called to do more and make a bigger impact, to take their own life experiences similar to how you've done and turning that wisdom into a way to serve other people. What piece of actionable advice would you have for others who are out there right now feeling called to do more? How could they move forward today?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I would like to pass on to people, and for me, as often as I can, I try to stay away from giving any specific advice to any specific individual. What I'd rather do is I would much rather share a story through which I've been able to discover it, and hopefully this will be able to relate to some of the people that are listening to the show. And that is for me, when I was in a similar position and I had experienced the same exact thoughts, I knew that I had a story to tell, and as part of it, I wanted to impact as many people as possible. Over time, what I've learned is that I was the one that was able to define my own world and what more means. So as I tapped into this story and really began to understand the power of it, and how by listening to other people's stories as well, I'm able to refine my story more and understand elements of it that I didn't understand or that I didn't even know existed. So throughout it, what I've learned is that I have a choice in how I view this quote unquote world and how I view all of the other words that you just mentioned, having a greater impact, impacting more people. Well, what does more mean? Is it impacting one other person? Is it impacting 5 other people? Thousands, hundreds? You get to define that. You get to define what your world is as well. And if there's anything that I've learned along this journey when it comes to impact, is that there's no action too small to have an impact. Your impact of being there for one other person throughout this whole lifetime is enough. For 5 people, for 10 people, for 100 people, it's all enough. And that's the most important part of it all, is I think once I stopped chasing this moving target of more, and just understood it to the best of my ability that my world consists of X, Y, and Z groups and X number of people. So the best I can do is just show up on a daily basis, be me, be present. Then that's when impact happens. So to a degree, I think the more aspect, I don't choose to look at it as far as a number, because you never know whether or not you're actually going to hit that number or go well beyond that.
Right. It's fantastic.
Or not hit it.
Yeah. It's fantastic advice. It really is what you said about it's what more means to each of us. And that might mean something different.
And that's perfectly fine. And I think that's ultimately how we're able to have a quote unquote bigger impact, is because then we're living ourselves and we're being us and we're impacting in the way that we are truly feeling like we're making a difference, instead of always trying to strive for more and thinking that, well, I haven't touched 1 million lives yet, therefore I have not made an impact on this world. When both of us and all the people that are listening know that that's not true. The people that have come into your life and the people that you've touched, you have had an impact on them. Now, there's a crossroad there, and that is you get to define what that impact was, and they get to define what that impact was. You might have thought that you going on to the stage as a speaker at X, Y, and Z event impacted the person in one way, but 10 years down the road, they choose to act upon that information in an entirely different way. So the whole concept of impact, what I've begun to understand is that I firmly believe that all I am in control of, and this is, those that aren't able to see it, that's in quotation marks, is that showing up, being myself, and giving it all I have. And throughout that, I'm able to have an impact on other people in whatever shape it may be. I don't think it's fair of us to define that shape, because even when you think about the different conversations, the different interviews that you listen to on a daily basis, does the whole 25-minute video have an impact on you? Or is it the 2 to 3 words that the person said that helped you define a different perspective?
Right. They're usually main takeaways, and those again vary for different people.
And it all depends where you are in life. You could be going through a challenge. And so because of that, part of your attention is elsewhere. Or you could be completely at peace and fully engaged with the entire 25-minute video. And therefore, every second, every word is going to have a different impact on you. So circumstances and environment play a big role in how you choose to act and engage with a particular piece of content, and which aspects of it you allow to impact your life.
They do, yes. Oleg, how can someone find you?
I think the best way to find us would be through our website, and that is overcomingodds.today. People can also connect with us through social media, and that is simply searching Overcoming Odds, or they can do what I've done, and that is connect with other people through LinkedIn. I'm a firm believer that LinkedIn it's extremely powerful, and I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine earlier today, and I was saying how the reason why I think LinkedIn is so powerful is because it's one of those platforms, and it's not to say that people don't have a similar mindset in other platforms. I'm just saying that based on my experience with the community that I've developed on LinkedIn, people are really engaged in wanting to learn, in wanting to help, serve, and be a contribution to others. And so as part of it, I think as long as I continue to choose to come into conversations with an open mind, then who knows what's possible.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, there's unlimited possibility. And I agree with you on LinkedIn. I think it's a fantastic community over there. I've met lots of amazing humans over there, including yourself.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being a guest on the show today, Oleg. I really loved our conversation, and you provided some really insightful, fantastic advice that I know our listeners are really going to find value in. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate the community that you build as far as wanting to help and empower others and elevate certain experiences. I think it speaks a lot as far as who you are as a person and what you choose to stand for. So I admire you for the work that you do and the person that you've become along this journey.
Thank you so much, Oleg. That really means a lot. I really appreciate your kind words.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Awake and on Purpose podcast. Please visit us and subscribe to the podcast at awakeandonpurpose.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can connect with your higher purpose and take that leap of faith to make your impact in the world, visit us at jenniferspor.com. And while you're there, be sure to join our email list for exclusive offers and a weekly dose of inspiration.